Yes. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another session of the Rising Tide Foundation. And this week, our speaker will be Pascal. And I'm not exactly sure what he's going to be talking about, but in the little blurb that I got, he said he was going to be using poetry and painting to look at actively and passively experiencing art, the difference in that, which should be good. And also to shatter the dichotomy between objective and subjective world. So with that lead in, Pascal, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. So yeah, I'm gonna try something today. I was inspired by Jerry's classes, Dave's class. I was offered a spot in this series, so I accepted it. I'm not sure if that was a good idea, but we'll try something today. I like poetry. I'm not sure I can exactly give a good rendition, but we'll see. We'll hear some poetry. Jerry's going to help me out. David Gosselin has been translating some poems from French. So I'm going to be reading the French version, and Jerry is going to help me with the English translation that David has given me in the past few days, past few hours, I would say, actually. So we'll look into that. I'm gonna share my screen. Now that's a little tricky. Share screen. This one. There you go. Okay. So I think you can see. Oh, that's not. Let's start from here, from the beginning. No. Okay, there you go. Just wanna. Okay, can you see the first slide with my name and all that? Okay, good. So we're going to start this. I wanted to move the pictures of everybody. Okay. With a little saying. So I once heard that when faced with two bad options, obviously, you have to take the third, right? So that's something that's I think we have to think about in terms of not just poetry, but in terms of poetry, but in different realms, personal, political, and all that. And I wanted to open it with this because I think poetry is really an opening. Great poets, anyhow, are always opening you to a different way of thinking, a different set of ideas that you didn't necessarily think yourself or nobody else in society had thought before them. And I was listening to a presentation David also sent me recently by an American poet named Joya, if I'm not mistaken, who was quoting Frost and telling people that basically this quote from Frost was that the poetry, I'm going to try to remember it from memory, but poetry is something that's put in, it's like a song. It's like a song. Poetry and music really are intertwined. And from the longest time, they were a mnemonic structure, a mnemonic tool to remember things, to remember the culture, to pass it on to the next generation, right? And so Frost was saying that basically poetry is that tool that helps us remember that which, if we had forgot, would impoverish all of us. And so I think that's the frame I want to look at poetry with. So in terms of poems, I'm not sure how long this presentation will go. It could go for a long time, depending. But I refrain myself from putting too much poems and paintings, because of course that's it. We could extrapolate and have all of our different ideas about them. But we'll try to see what kind of discussion we can have with the ones that are following. Also, this is not exactly a historical presentation. That would go on, that can go on forever with me and Jerry, but this is not the case right now. So I tried to put some details on the history, the time frame, but that too, I tried to refrain myself, because I wanted to be really on poetry and not just a history class, as I've given some. So we'll look into poems. First, I have a quote I wanted to read from Percy Shelley, from A Defense of Poetry, and we're going to come back to this later on in the presentation. So this is not the last quote that you'll see from Percy Shelley. Now, I'm going to read this one because I was rereading A Defense of Poetry recently. And of course, it's not a poem, but it's in defense of poetry. And it's an interesting take on what poetry is, because most people today, you look at poetry, maybe you're lucky enough to have studied some in school, but it's not really that common. It's more, we have nursery rhymes, sing-along songs, things like that we kind of put in the category of poetry, but it's not really. That's not what poetry is for Shelley, and it's not what it is for this presentation either. So I was rereading A Defense of Poetry, and that passage that I'm going to read to you, I don't know, it surprised me. I didn't remember reading this from my past reading, and I read A Defense of Poetry a couple times. But this stuck with me this time more than ever. So I'll read that. The poetry and the doctrines of Jesus Christ, and the mythology and institutions of the Celtic conquerors of the Roman Empire, outlived the darkness and the convulsions connected with their growth and victory, and blended themselves in a new fabric of manners and opinion. It is an error to impute the ignorance of the Dark Ages to the Christian doctrines, or the predominance of the Celtic nations. Whatever of evil their agencies may have contained sprang from the extinction of the poetical principle, connected with the progress of despotism and superstition. Man, from causes too intricate to be here discussed, had become insensible and selfish. Their own will had become feeble, and yet they were its slaves, and thence the slaves of the will of others. Lust, fear, avarice, cruelty, and fraud characterized a race amongst whom no one was to be found capable of creating in form, language, or institution. The moral anomalies of such a state of society are not justly to be charged upon any class of events immediately connected with them, And those events are most entitled to our approbation, which could dissolve it most expeditiously. It is unfortunate for those who cannot distinguish words from thoughts that many of these anomalies have been incorporated into our popular religion. So this, I thought was a very interesting quote from Percy Shelley. I don't necessarily want to go into, all of the different religious aspect of it all. Percy Shelley is known as a critique of the established churches of his time. Some say that he was an atheist. Not sure about that, but that has to be dealt with in another presentation on his poetry and his philosophy. But in this, I thought it was very interesting that he said that the Dark Ages were not dark, in a sense, because of the Christian doctrines. And he talks about the Celtic nations that conquered the Roman Empire. So it was not because of that, but it was really because of a lack of poetical principle. I thought that's interesting. Okay. What is so what is it? We need to have poets everywhere? We need to have people writing and singing songs? What does he mean by poetry? What was lacking? What's this principle that was lacking? And so that's an open question. I'm not sure I have the answer, but I'll try something today. Try to go into this. And so I thought that was opening with a pretty good irony. What is that poetry that was lacking during the Dark Age that made it so dark? Okay. So let's read something from the Dark Age, but which is a bit more uplifting. I'm going to read the fable of the cat and the mice in French. This is by Eustache Deschamps, who lived in the 14th century, second half of the 14th century. And I'm going to go to the next slide. I'll read it in French, and then Jerry is going to read it in English, and I'll comment on it, and yeah, we'll see what we can do at that time. Okay, so I'll read it in French. J'apprends qu'entre les souris, il y eut une discussion incroyable au sujet des chats, leurs ennemis, pour savoir comment elles pourraient vivre en sécurité et n'être plus apeurées. L'une d'elles dit alors, pour résoudre ce problème, qui pendra la sonnette au chat? Cet avis fut accepté et partagé. Elles se séparent ainsi, toutes d'accord. Une souris du plat pays les rencontre et demande ce qui a été décidé. Elles répondent alors que leurs ennemis seront défaits. Ils auront une sonnette pendant au cou. Qui pendra la sonnette au chat? Ce ne sera pas mince affaire, dit un rat gris. Elle demande avec sagesse qui accomplira cet exploit. Alors, chacune s'en va avec une bonne excuse. Il n'y a aucun volontaire. Leur besogne tombe donc à plat. On parle bien, mais au demeurant, qui prendra la sonnette au chat? Prince, on vous conseille bien souvent, mais on peut dire, à la suite du rat, à propos du conseil qui n'aboutit à rien, qui prendra la sonnette au chat? All right, your turn, Jerry.
Okay. The fable of the cat and the mice. Among the mice, a great meeting took place, a wonderful conspiracy against their foe, the feline race, to devise some quaint trickery by which to rout their enemy. So long they lasted in their spat, one with the other arguing, who hangs the bell upon the cat? The meeting ended with a plan. The partisans now made their way. A mouse from the flat country ran to meet them and to bid them say or share what had been done. They said their foes would be outsmarted soon. A bell would from the cat's neck hang. Who hangs the bell upon the cat? The strongest one, said the gray rat. She proceeds then to nicely ask, who will accomplish this great feat? Each mouse begins to walk. Alas, no one to execute remains. The task still idle, incomplete. All spoke well, but still one might ask, who hangs the bell upon the cat? Prince, often will we counsel hold, but we can say, just like the rat, concerning counsels with no end, who hangs the bell upon the cat? That's funny.
Yeah. So, of course, it's a fable, right? It's about animals. So the mice had a plan, and it was a nicely crafted plan, which totally makes sense, right? If you put a bell upon the cat, then you don't have to be stressed. You can do your mice thing and live without fear, because when the cat's around, you'll hear him and you'll be able to skedaddle and go away. So this is an interesting poem. I chose it because I like it very much. The first time I heard it, I was in France, and it really stuck with me since then, many years ago. I put just to give a little context, I did give a presentation where I went more into the 100 Years War, but this map here of France in 1330 gives you an idea of what was going on. So France was not exactly what we know it as today in shape. It was, well, the King of England had a claim to the throne of France. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the details, but there was a war which ensued from that claim, and it lasted not exactly 100 years. Actually, it lasted more like 123 years. So it was a long war, on and off, between the English and between the French. And our author, Eustache Deschamps, lives at that time. He wrote the poem, and the war was not over yet. So at the time, France, as you can see, was there were different parts of France. It was not really like the whole country was not unified, the realm at the time, because it was run by a king or a prince, right? And so there were different claims upon the throne of France, and basically no leader was able to kick the English out of France and restore the supremacy to the French king, to the heir of the crown. But so this is an interesting take on what is going on at the time, especially the last stanza here with the prince, because obviously today we could see it a bit differently, but at the time, the discussion of the mice getting into a conspiracy, a meeting, a parliament, basically of the mice, deciding what was going to be done about their enemies, the cat. Well, who's in a good position to do that? Who's in a position to actually enact the general welfare for the mice? Well, obviously it's the one that's on top, you know, the prince at the time. This was the political system that ran the show. So this is an interesting take. It took, just to go back into the 100 Years' War, this is before Joan of Arc. Okay, so yeah, Eustache Deschamps never knew of Joan of Arc, so he died before she happened. She came by. So this is an interesting poem in that sense, not just for the political reasons of the context in which it was written, but also now we can think about, you know, what does it mean? What does it mean for us today? How could it impact, you know, our lives, or how can we use that as a lesson for our days? You know, who hangs the bell upon the cat today? That's a question. It still rings. It's still that question still rings until today. So I'm gonna go to the next one. Yes, there we go. The next one is by Victor Hugo. You might know him for the Miserables or the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He wrote many great pieces, and he was a great poet. Well, okay, same thing. I'm gonna read the French version, and then Jerry is gonna read the English one that was translated by David Gostin. So, la fonction du poète. Dieu le veut, dans les temps contraires, chacun travaille et chacun sert. Malheur à qui dit à ses frères, je retourne dans le désert. Malheur à qui prend ses sandales quand les haines et les scandales tourmentent le peuple agité. Honte aux penseurs qui se mutilent et s'en va, chanteur inutile, par la porte de la cité. Le poète, en des jours impies, vient préparer des jours meilleurs. Il est l'homme des utopies. Les pieds ici, les yeux ailleurs. C'est lui qui, sur toutes les têtes, en tout temps, pareil au prophète, dans sa main, où tout peut tenir, doit, qu'on l'insulte ou qu'on le loue, comme une torche qu'il secoue, faire flamboyer l'avenir. Il voit, quand les peuples végètent, ses rêves, toujours pleins d'amour, sont faits des ombres que lui jettent les choses qui seront un jour. On leur aille, qu'importe, il pense. Plus d'une âme inscrit en silence ce que la foule n'entend pas. Il plaint ses contempteurs frivoles et maintes faux sages à ses paroles, rit tout haut et songe tout bas. Peuple, écoutez le poète, écoutez le rêveur sacré. Dans votre nuit, sans lui complète, lui seul a le front éclairé. Des temps futurs, perçant les ombres, lui seul distingue en leur flanc sombre le germe qui n'est pas éclos. Homme, il est doux comme une femme. Dieu parle à voix basse à son homme, comme aux forêts et comme aux flots. C'est lui qui, malgré les épines, l'envie et la dérision, marche courbé dans vos ruines, ramassant la tradition. De la tradition féconde sort tout ce qui couvre le monde, tout ce que le ciel peut bénir, toute idée, humaine ou divine, qui prend le passé pour racine, a pour feuillage l'avenir. Il rayonne, il jette sa flamme sur l'éternelle vérité. Il la fait resplendir pour l'âme d'une merveilleuse clarté. Il inonde de sa lumière ville et désert, Louvre et chaumière. et les plaines et les hauteurs, à tous d'en haut il la dévoile, car la poésie est l'étoile qui mène à Dieu, roi et pasteur. Oh. Okay, going back to the beginning. It's all yours, Jerry.
Okay, the poet's function. And in English, I've always said Victor Hugo. I don't think that's the correct pronunciation, but that's how I was taught, Victor Hugo. But okay, the poet's function. God summons him in times awry when each must rise and each must serve. But shame on him who hopes to hide or wanders off into the desert. And shame on him who steals away when cities burn and souls decay, and all is left to vicious fates. Woe to him with mutinous thoughts who, helpless, sings his songs distraught, then scampers out the city's gates. The poet in such wayward times bring tidings of men's brighter days. A denizen of higher spheres, his worldly eyes pierce heaven's haze. The poet clears a conscious way in every time, the prophet of his day. He bears the torchlight in his hands, be there insult, doubt, or dismay. Its gentle flames shed tender rays, lighting the way to future lands. He sees the people vegetate. His dreams are always full of love, the shadows that will consecrate the things that will one day become. And yet they mock him ceaselessly. Vile souls in silent resignation press in frivolous and contemptuous streams. Then, time and time again, they'll mock and scorn his holy fen with shameful smirks and debased dreams. Oh, people, listen to the poet. Listen to the sacred dreamer. The night without him's dimly lit, but he will always see ahead. Futurity and its dim shadows he uniquely always hollows, seeing the fruit in unripe vines. A man, sensitive like woman, God softly whispers to his soul, just as he does through woods and streams. It's he who, despite all the thorns, the envy, and the cold derision, marches across the ruins and salvages tradition. And from the rich tradition's fruit springs all that which takes later root, and all which is by heaven blessed, all ideas, human or divine, which have their roots in distant time, the leaves with which the future's dressed. He glows, shedding his light onto fields of eternal verity. He instills in our spirit's depths a calm and sacred clarity. He lights up the city and desert, both cottages and valleys, both endless plains and soaring heights, and above all becomes unveiled. Poesy is the star that leads both kings and shepherds to God's light.
Thank
Nice.
you, Jerry. Yeah, I'm very happy that David took the time to translate this poem by Victor Hugo. It's one also that I've known for quite some time, and it always, you could say that maybe the vocabulary, is from a different era, but it really is something to me that has this quality of universal and actually intemporal. So maybe somebody would rewrite it differently today, but in his days, I think that that was really perfect. And just to go into a little bit of it, I'll go back, whoops, with the slides. So at the beginning, it's really discussing this idea that the poets have a duty, right? So this question of what is poetry again, from the quote I gave you from Shelley at the beginning. So what was lacking in terms of the poetical principle in the Dark Ages? So what is it that's the poet's function? And so in the beginning, Victor Hugo says that a poet needs to stick to his guns. Basically, he has to stay even though situation might not be the best for him or for society overall. He has to stay in the city and continue his work. So there's something that the poet can do with his art to make the world better. Clearly, that's something that is in the first stanzas. And so he's got to be a conscious being in society, and has to help, has to bring forth what he sees that's not there yet. So he's kind of like the in between. He's in the in between space time, we could say. Maybe he sees what has been going on and what's going on at the present time, and he also can imagine through his poetry, can imagine what should be, what should become of society. And so even in the dark space, he should be the one. In the second stanza, it says he should bear the torchlight in his hand, the lighting the way to the future lands, right? And even though others are not in his state or are not seeing what he sees, he should not withdraw from society. He should not go away. And he should, he has to bear with basically maybe the littleness of the people of his time. People will mock him for seeing something where situation says that, I don't know, it's pretty dark, it's pretty maybe hopeless, some people might say. And so those who are convinced of that will mock him, because he sees something that's not there, that your senses cannot conceive, because it's true. Something you can't touch, something you can't see, you can't smell. But he's the one who can make it ring, in a sense, a bit like the bell of the cat, right? Or the bell of the mice that they want to put on the cat. And whoops, too far. Yeah. And so there's this link in the fourth stanza. Hugo brings in this link that the poet does in terms of communicating something that's of a heavenly origin, of a godly origin. So God is said to whisper to his soul and gives him these visions of the future, these things that are there for him that are not necessarily there for others, right? And so he's got a very he has to have that connection with God to be able to connect and give it to the rest of the population. And I see Susan. That's it, exactly. Yeah, to inspire and uplift others. That's it. That's exactly it. So that's the job of the poet, it seems. That's what he does. And so he's walking into the stream. He's going against the waves of the present culture, the people, the ambiance of his time, the zeitgeist of his time, right? And although, like Schiller said, you need to be of your time, but you don't necessarily need to go with it. You know, you know the culture you live in, but you don't necessarily need to partake like everybody else. And so that's part of the duty of the poet. And now I'm at the end. Yeah. And so I don't necessarily want to go line by line, but this is a very very interesting transition that the poets at the beginning, he has to stay there and he has to continue what he does, and then in the middle you see that basically because he has this kind of godly gift, is power to transmit the future to the next generation, or his generation, if they are willing to accept it, right? So right now I see that there are other messages. I might just come back to them later. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not gonna stick. Yeah, I'll stick to the presentation. I'll end it, and after that we'll take questions about the different parts. So what I wanted to say about the last part, and so, well, basically, it evolves to the point where at the end, Hugo says that poesy is the star that leads both kings and shepherds to God's light. So that's interesting, because we were discussing the function of the poet, and maybe also who is the poet, right? So there's this thing, there's poetry overall, there's this principle that Shelley was saying lacked during the Dark Ages, and then so we looked at different poems, and now I'm kind of wondering, by this ending, both kings and shepherds are led by poetry to God's light. So it reminds me of the last stanza, where in the cat and mice fable, it is said to the prince, there's a call made upon the prince saying, Prince, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of different parliaments meeting, and nice initiatives being adopted and all that, but in the end, who's going to do it? Who's going to hang the bell on the cat? And I find this goes very well with it, with the previous poem, because I'm wondering, what is it that poetry can enlighten even the kings and the shepherds, so all different layers, strata of the population. What is that power that can actually amalgamate or get all of these different people, different what's the word? Well, basically, yeah, the different strata of the population to have a vision that to have a common vision, a common idea for the general welfare. That I thought was very very interesting. let's go on. Let's go on. I don't want to stick too much on that, but I told you we would go back to Percy Shelley, and so I exerted part of his A Defense of Poetry. This is the famous last paragraph from his Defense of Poetry that I wanted to read. Yeah, so here it goes. At such periods, there is an accumulation of the power of communicating and receiving intense and impassioned conceptions respecting man and nature. The person in whom this power resides may often, as far as regards many portions of their nature, have little apparent correspondence with that spirit of good of which they are the ministers. But even whilst they deny and abjure, they are yet compelled to serve that power which is seated on the throne of their own soul. It is impossible to read the compositions of the most celebrated writers of the present day without being startled with the electric life which burns within their words. They measure the circumference and sound the depths of human nature with a comprehensive and all-penetrating spirit, and they are themselves perhaps the most sincerely astonished at its manifestations, for it is less their spirit than the spirit of the age. Poets are the hierophants of an unapprehended inspiration, the mirrors of the gigantic shadows which futurity casts upon the present, the words which express what they understand not, the trumpets which sing to battle and feel not what they inspire, the influence which is moved not, but moves. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And as an aside, I'd put the person in whom this power resides may often, as far as regard many portion of their nature, have little apparent correspondence with that spirit of good of which they are the ministers, right? So that was at the beginning. Shelley is talking about a time of crisis where basically people who were not poets, like Victor Hugo or Eustache Deschamps, these guys were known for their poetry. But Shelley says that at times you get into crises and people were not necessarily known, although he says that in his days there were a lot of great poets, a lot of great writers that had this electric life that burned through their words. Well, he says that actually some of these people were not seeing themselves as such. They were not predestined, in a sense, to be poets and to bring about revolutions in that field or in any field, in political, social realms. So that, but the poets are the ones that are shifting the whole system. There's something that they are able to do, which was alluded to in Victor Hugo's poem. They have this connection that they might deny. They might say, "No, I'm not ready for that," or "I'm not. That's not what I'm doing. I'm doing something else." But actually, they will be recognized as that, as people who had this insight into the future and were able to actually put it in words and communicate it, bring it to people, bring it to mankind, or nowadays we say humankind, I heard. So to bring it to the whole of the earth, right, and discuss higher principle of how nature works and how we should work in it, how the spirit of man actually also has this part in nature. And so I thought it was a nice way to end the portion on poetry. And so we're going to go into the paintings now. And I see, what time is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have a bit of time still. That's good. So we'll transit into a new portion. And I know I saw that some people had comments, maybe questions. I'm going to get to them a bit later on. So let's just continue that journey into the painting, and I'll be glad to entertain, try to answer, maybe if I can, some of your questions. So there's a great painting, and Matthew actually sent it, a portion of it, in the invite to this presentation. I'm not sure if I told him I was going to use it. I was a bit surprised, but it totally made sense when I told him what the presentation was going to be. And I know that Jerry knows that painting very well, and he did give a presentation on it. And so I'm not exactly going to do that, but I'm going to just point to certain things that I find are interesting in that painting. That's a painting by Rembrandt. Maybe most of you know about it. It's called. It's taken from the biblical story of Jesus on the Sea of Galilee, and so the story is that they went, for fishing, and then they were caught into a big storm. So Jesus and the apostles. And Jesus was asleep during the storm. He was not really caring so much, or fell asleep before the storm, and then the storm didn't really wake him up. And so what I of course we could discuss the whole artistic merit of that painting. I'm not necessarily going to go into this, but of course Rembrandt was known for his the lighting, the use of the lighting in his pieces, and is really exceptional. But what I'm really interested in is this guy, right? So I don't know if you could see him into when the painting, the whole, I give you the whole thing, right? And so you see all the apostles that are, well, some are at work, right? On the left-hand side, they're trying to get, the ship to control it, to control, the everything on the ship. They're working hard, and I guess they're doing what they should be doing. And then there's the rest on the right-hand side that are around Jesus, who was sleeping, and now he's waking up. And there's this one down there who's looking into the flows and trying to, like, I guess he's just waiting to die, just like seeing obviously the situation is very perilous, and no one's gonna make it. So you have that on the right hand side. People are freaking out. They are waking up Jesus and saying like, hey, you got to do something, as if he was the one who could deal with that. Of course. So everybody on the left hand side is working to try to steer the ship, and also the guy who's at the helm, he's trying to steer the ship out of the storm somehow. And then you have the crew that's around Jesus and saying, hey, do something, if you're really the Son of God, like, hey, you got to do something. And then you have Rembrandt, who's there, right? This guy, and he's looking at you. He's holding his cap one hand, holding to the ship with the other, to the cable, and he's looking at you, looking at them. He's wondering. Probably he's saying, should have gone, put a rain check on that trip on the sea and just stay home. That might have been a better idea. I don't know. What would you have done? Would you have gone to sea? If you had known, I don't know. But hey, he's there. It's too late. There's no way. There's no step back. Can't go back. So he's looking at you. And that was the first thing I was thinking when I was asked to give that presentation. I was thinking as, art and poetry, painting as a self-reflexive process. I think that Rembrandt really, in this piece, he gives it to you so well, so nicely. It's a great story, but the painting really gives it a new dimension, right? So Rembrandt is there, and he used to put himself into the paintings, but in this one, it's so obvious, right? And so he's the only one looking at you. Everybody else is either trying to, steer the ship, working on the ship, or looking at Jesus, or looking in the depth of the sea, shaken, afraid. But Rembrandt doesn't really look afraid on that. He's just looking like, is this for real? What am I doing here? And what would you do if you were in my place? What's the right thing to do? I don't know. Never been caught in a storm on a ship. Don't exactly know how I would react. But maybe we're already on a ship that's going along somewhere on the stream. Let's go to the next one. This is older. This is by that's Bruegel. I don't have my notes. Sorry. So this is called The Triumph of Death. And it's not a nice, it's not such a nice painting, right? Looks pretty chaotic and macabre. Very bad situation in there. I think that's kind of worse than a storm on the sea. Not sure, but it looks pretty bad. I wouldn't like to be there either. So you see different things going on in this painting. I'm not going to go into all of that, but all of them. But you see that you have a war going on, right? There's a fight going on. There are people dying left and right everywhere. It's chaos. You also have in the left, the bottom left, you have a king, it seems. It's laying down, dying, um, after having fought. And there's like characters that are skulls or skeletons that are killing people. So that reminds me a bit of like the culture we're in right now with all of the zombies movie and series, right? How do you kill something that's already like dead, kind of? And so maybe that was the zombie movie of the time. But this is pretty horrifying. And it's dark. And then when you're kind of done looking at all of the details of the horror, you kind of see that there's something going on down here. There's this character that's about to draw his sword, right? On the right bottom hand side. And he's looking at all of this, and he's probably terrified like we are right now. And he's about to draw his sword, so he's about to make a move, do something. I don't know exactly what he's expecting. You know, can he win the fight? Does that make any sense? Will one more do any good? For what cause? What was he going to fight for? Is he fighting for survival? Also, is it just for survival, or is there something that we can win? It looks pretty hopeless. It's a desolate situation, right? That's what it looks to me, anyhow. So he's about to draw his sword, right? So maybe he just happened to arrive to the battlefield. I don't know. Where was he before that? I don't, no idea. But he's there now, and he's about to get into the fight. So I don't know. This is called the triumph of death. Whew. I don't know what Bruegel wanted to give us. You know, was that a hopeful? Maybe there's a second part to that painting that I don't know of. Maybe the triumph of life. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it. So I'm not going to get into any political context right now. This is not the point. Obviously, there are probably links that could be done, but right now I'm just focusing on that painting. And that's the end. So I'll stop the share, but if you want, we can go back to the paintings eventually. I'll just look into the different comments since I missed them. Oh my God, there are a couple ones, huh? Oh, okay. I think you're muted by default. Whoops, one sec. That's not what I want to do. I'm not going to change that, but you can unmute yourself if you have a question. I'm just right now trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. So here are, okay. there was something that was posted. It's quite long. I'm not sure I'm gonna have time to read any of that right now, but I'll save it for sure. I'm gonna try to save that and have it later on. I think it was by Yuri. You posted that. So yeah, maybe for now, unless Yuri, you want to say something about this, because it looks quite long. I'm not sure.
Well, I did post the lyrics to a song called "The Future," since we were talking about the future.
Okay.
To mind Leonard Cohen's song called "The Future," and well, I posted the lyrics, but the format really got it really spread out. So underneath there's a link where you can read the lyrics yourself. Anyway, you know, it's like precognition or something. I mean, it really is kind of like the future, which happens to be happening now. It also brought to mind Hieronymus Bosch's painting. I mean, you know, they're not inspiring and uplifting. They are, if anything, they're inspiring you to not have that kind of future. You know, to run away. But you know what fascinates me about all this is some artists seem to have an ability to see the future. I don't know poetry very well, but I know a lot of rock and roll lyrics, and you know, you'll find stuff like that in the Doors music, and in other darker rock and roll music. Jim Morrison was a poetry fan. He quotes I think it's Yeats in one of his songs. I think it's the end.
Okay.
Where he says, "Some are born to sweet delight, some are born to the endless night." I don't know which English poet did that, but it's in that song. And then of course there's Joni Mitchell's song "Slouching Towards Bethlehem," which is basically a transcription of a Yeats poem. None of these are very inspiring or uplifting or showing a very hopeful future. And I kind of like it like that because I'm kind of dark myself. So it kind of fits in with my mentality. I'm half Russian, half German. So what do you expect? You're going to get some dark spots.
Okay.
These
right.
things.
Well, there's this link. Maybe I was thinking about, you know, like in the last painting I showed by.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's Bruegel.
Bruegel. That's right. That's right. It was not Bosch. Bruegel. I have a little story about that.
Bosch had some with the triptych. I couldn't.
Yeah. The
there with
Earthly Delights one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I didn't really want to. I thought it was enough.
Okay.
This character of the guy that's drawing his sword, right, in the bottom left, bottom right. I was thinking, so what? Maybe there's a link with the poet in the poem by Victor Hugo, right? That poet that shouldn't flee when situations are getting bad, right? But at the same time, it looks hopeless, right? Like the situation.
Well, it sure does. As a matter of fact, it reminds me of the era we're in. I mean, if you look at all the connections of the darkness that we're surrounded by, it also looks hopeless. The immense power that we're faced with. I don't know if everybody agrees with me or knows what I'm talking about, but it certainly seems that way to me. And you know, an interesting thing about that painting is that I remember that painting from age 4. My mother showed it to me while playing classical music, and I know every square inch of that painting. Maybe that's why I'm so dark.
Okay. Yeah, maybe the
Well, I don't know, you know,
Sure.
well, are these good things? Is it good to, is this just the zeitgeist that artists and painters are reflecting? Are they just picking up on the vibes, the general zeitgeist and illustrating them? Or do
That's,
they actually,
I'm not
are they
sure.
actually prophetic?
Hmm.
And if they're prophetic, are they just taking the existing incidents and projecting them into the future?
Yeah.
That's that's just being aware of what's going on and projecting them, taking them off and taking the timeline of that and just saying, well, and if this and this is happening, then this is going to happen.
Hmm.
I wouldn't really call that prophetic, but
Okay, that's a good question, Yuri. I'm not sure I can answer
I can't answer any of these
in a
questions.
good way, but I know other people have comments, and
Okay, yeah, go.
we can come back.
Sure.
I think it's a good question to ask yourself, even though we don't have answers necessarily. I think that's kind of why the presentation. So thank you for that, and
Okay.
to Satomi.
Oops. Thank you. Well, when you were talking about the Dark Ages, it kind of reminded me of one of my favorite Christian writers, mystic, Julian of Norwich. And she was, I think it was, I've got her book here, but if you can see it, she was in 1343 to 1428. But she had a revelation of the love of Jesus Christ. And one of the revelations that she was given was that there was a secret deed that Jesus is going to do at the end of the age. And she wasn't told exactly what it was, but I mean, when I read it, my heart just leaped because obviously it's a great deed of mercy and love. And this was, as you say, she lived through the Black Plague, and yet her book is just so more than inspiring, but it's so revelatory. And so I just thought I'd bring that up, that even in the dark ages, God shines through.
Right, right. Good point. Good point. Oh, I see there's a lot of hands up. Uh-oh. Okay. We'll go to Jerry, then Susan, then there's Daniel. So I'm gonna try to go by the chat and by the hands that are up. Okay, so Jerry first.
Okay, thanks. Oh, that was very good, Pascal. I just have a few comments, but I didn't, Victor Hugo, I mean, I never had read that poem before. That was fascinating. I always read his, science fiction stories, but the poem really gives you a better understanding of who he was. And the first poem you read, and I read too, the "Who will put the bell on the cat?" It just ties into those two paintings, because I know the one by Rembrandt, I had done a class on that before, but when I heard someone else do a class on it, and they started out by just saying, count the number of people in that painting. And you sit there and count them, and you go 14. And they go, yeah, well, you got Jesus, you got the 12 apostles. Well, that's 13. Why is there 14? And so everyone's going, racking their brains out. Who the heck is the 14th? And then you finally discover that Rembrandt put himself in the painting as number 14. And I think it's good that the question, who's going to put the bell on the cat? Just leave it open as that, so that he's looking at you, asking you that too. And the other one, the Bruegel, the thing I noticed before, the person you mentioned in the bottom right-hand corner, if you look behind him, you have the table with the white tablecloth, and it looks like the spotlight is on him in a funny way. So he's the center of the whole painting. And I guess to his left down in the corner is there's a couple who aren't dead yet. And the one guy's playing, I don't know, a guitar or something. And it looks like his wife or girlfriend, whatever, is singing. So it's like you're going, is he protecting them or is he getting ready to do battle? And, you know, you look at his sword, is he pulling it out or is he putting it in? You don't know. But the thing that got me is, you know, like with the Victor Hugo poem, at least he's there. He didn't run away. So he's still got to make a decision, but at least he's there to make a decision, which, you know, kind of, it really gets you thinking a lot of times. Anyway, that was just my comment. It was very good the way those poems tied into those paintings. I really liked that. I really did.
Great. Yes. Well, all of these, I was expecting you would actually know these details too, so that's good. I'm happy I didn't go into them. Cool. Excellent. I think was Susan, Danielle have Rising Tide. Matthew, do we see there? That's also next. So Susan first.
I think Gerald kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you bring up that last painting again?
Okay.
But Helene had written in the comments, he's guarding love. He's protecting love.
Oh, I missed that in the comments. Okay.
And it was such a cool thought because when you look at it, it's like he's not entered into the chaotic fray of death, but he is standing guard over love. So it's like that place of love and beauty and the music. He's standing guard over that. He's protecting it. Okay. So that the death can't come and steal that.
I totally agree. And as Jerry said, you know, we're not sure if he's putting his sword out or if he's putting it back. It's not, you know, as he's looking at what's going on around, that's scary. So and you have people being chased and killed all over the place, all around him. And there's also this army of skulls that are behind. I don't know if you see it. It's just a little bit above him on the right hand side. Doesn't bode too well, but you're right that there's this couple and this man that's playing the lute, or I'm not sure exactly the instrument, and you have this couple. So is it worth the sacrifice? Is it what he's contemplating as he's drawing his sword? Is it to protect them? I like the idea, or protect love with, you know, capital L. Very good. We have a good crowd here. That's good. I like that. So thank you for your comments, Satomi and Susan. Danielle?
Yeah, hello, Pascal. Well, thank you. What I found interesting, and I was really moved when you read the third page of the Victor Hugo poem. Like an emotion just came to me. Like I was like, I had tears in my eyes. And what I noticed, it's not the same feeling when you read in English. When Gérard read in English, it doesn't touch me the same way. And it was the first time that I've got like a French reading and an English reading, you know, side by side. So I can see the resonance of the words inside of me. I don't know if anyone, or if you're French, or if you can share that feeling. It resonates differently. The words that I don't know, I can explain. I will reflect on it further and read back again this third page to see what touches me. But I found it interesting. Like, so this is what I wanted to say. Thank you for doing it in both languages, though.
Mm. Well, I thought, yeah, to me the French version really bring it home. I hope it does for the English speakers, for the English version that we have from David. Obviously, I discussed with David over his translation, and it's not easy translating languages.
It's a beautiful translation. It's
Yeah, it's
really
well done.
the words that he choose, well, from my perspective, are really on it. It's just that
Mhm.
I don't know. There's something in the languages, and maybe this is what it's beautiful. Like,
It's hard to bring it from one language to the other. It's not going to trigger the same emotion. I know for me,
mm,
it's not the same, since also French is my mother tongue. So yeah, it does bring some emotions at different points, and yeah, to me the English version doesn't do the same, but it was composed in French, so I guess that's also part of it. But that's a good point. That's a good comment. Thanks, Danielle. Is it oh, let's go to Matthew now. Matthew had a comment, and then Kelly.
Yes, Pascal, thank you. I'm really glad that I got to take part in this one. And I was really inspired by the Victor Hugo piece. So thank you, Dave, as well. Is Dave on right now?
No, I don't think so.
Ah, shucks. Okay. I was so moved by that by the Victor Hugo that I was thinking that I might even include that in my I have to give a presentation at a conference this coming Friday, and I might start with that actually to try to generate what it is that that the oligarchy is so afraid of when they're trying to impose closed systems upon humanity. What is this characteristic that they're so frightened by? And I think Victor Hugo really struck at the Schillerian nerve so beautifully regarding the question of the poet from that beautiful standpoint. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. And in Basel, Cynthia and I we had a chance 2 days ago to go to a museum. And we saw not this version, but Peter Bruegel did a few different versions of this giant painting. And so we saw a slightly different variant that he painted back in the days before photocopiers. And again, it's just as moving. I mean, even obviously more so. This thing's a whole wall, it's huge. And the thing that really pops out at that with that anomalous bottom right hand corner, because everywhere is like death, right? There's no one who is escaping or who is not being touched by death's victorious hand anywhere in that painting, except that bottom right hand anomalous corner. But even there, the question is like, well, what is it? What's really going on? And I know you brought this up, but I think this question of classical tragedy is really present, because the fact that you have the backgammon table and the cards on the floor, people were obviously in a partying atmosphere, is not a coincidence. Like I don't know if the couple who are in a very loving romantic state playing music to each other, I don't know if that's an homage to the beauty of just true love, capital L, or if it's maybe the sign that these people should have perhaps been thinking about the future and not guzzling back, what appears to be, I don't know what's on the table in terms of the painting we saw had a lot of booze on the table and junk food and cards on the floor. So there's definitely a sense that people were like living the moment and just enjoying too much the sensual experience and not thinking about the future, what they should have been able to foresee coming onto them. So I kind of got that really came out in the big mural, and I think you sort of see it here as well.
Yeah,
but that's
too much details. There's a lot of details we could go into.
So much.
Yeah, but you're right. Like, and I would tie it back to the quote by Shelley, because we don't really know. It's true. It's like a photograph. paintings are like, photographs, like they're an instant, and we don't really know what happened before, but we kind of intuit it based on what you said, like the details, what we see. It must have been a party before, things are upside down, and we don't know what's going to happen after. So you could decide, you could see, and that's kind of the point of the beginning, when you have two bad options in front of you, you take the third one. And so what's in front of these characters, should they flee? As Jerry said, the guy is still there, so it's a testament to, I don't know, courage. Maybe not courage, maybe temerity. Not sure, and that's these are all interesting points, and I don't really want to settle on them. Thanks, Matthew. We have Adria. Am I missing other people? I think, well, Adria for now. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. This morning, actually, in the Epoch Times, I know it's maybe not the favorite newspaper of this group, but there was a story on Victor Hugo. I'm not sure if you're aware of his drawings, but his drawings are very dark and involve this kind of chiaroscuro play of dark and light that you see in the Rembrandt. I just wanted to say, today's sermon, the second Sunday of Lent, it recounts the time when Jesus takes the first four apostles up to Mount Tabor, and he appears as light to them as they ascend. His robes become very white, and he appears as like a beam of light and frightens them. And he says, "Don't be afraid." I think Rembrandt really plays, perhaps arguably better than any other artist other than Caravaggio, with this theatrical concept of using light to convey the essence of the spiritual story of this awakening, or, this path forward. In the Bruegel, there's just this chaotic mess. And as Matthew was saying, those lovers don't seem to be immune to it. They just seem to be oblivious to their inevitable fate. And even were they to realize what's going on around them, if they weren't so self-absorbed, there would be no escaping it, because there's really no clearing. Whereas in the other painting, in the Rembrandt, even though Jesus is positioned at the bottom of the boat in the darkness, there's this clearing in the clouds and this suggestion that he's paving this way, or he's presenting a path. And of course, that's what he said. He said, "I am the light and the way." One last thing I wanted to say was that there is this history of that Rembrandt painting that is further interesting potentially to the group, insofar as it was stolen, and it has not been located. It was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was at the Isabel Gardner Museum in Massachusetts, and I think the early 1990s, and it has yet to be returned. I think it's theorized that the mafia has it, but it's the only Rembrandt that depicts a sea scene, if I'm not mistaken. And one thing that occurred to me as you were making this presentation is that in some ways it's the antithesis of Géricault's Raft of the Medusa, which is afforded, pride of place at the Louvre. When you go into the Louvre, there's the history paintings in the Grand Salon, and it's really the focal point in that room of the great works of art. And I'm not suggesting it isn't a great work of art, but it's really the antithesis insofar as the group on that raft is just in despair. They've moved into cannibalism. All is lost. There are corpses on the raft. There's no way. There's no path out of the darkness, and we know what happens to them. They all die. So in many respects, it's like the Bruegel, but it's in a version that very much makes a bridge between the Bruegel and the Rembrandt. And Rembrandt is really, I think, the opposite. In the tumult, there is yet the possibility of the way forward. And you see the light only through the darkness. And maybe that's why the light is positioned in the darkness of the frame. But that's what I have to contribute. And thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Great. Yeah, I know which painting you're referencing. Yeah, it is a terrifying painting. It dates, I think it's early 19th century or late 19th century. Yeah, something. But you're right too. I mean, it's hard, like these concepts, and I did not really, well, I didn't focus on that, but you could see, we could have, maybe I could have put different poems in contradiction. Could have been interesting too. This was not for today. This was not the idea that was driving me.
Didn't speak
But
to the
light and darkness, yeah, it's always interesting contrast, right?
the poems were fantastic. And thank you also, David, for the translations. The poems were great. And I apologize for not speaking to the poems. I just didn't want to take too much time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, you know, Matthew gave me, told me I could present something. So I said, well, I'm going to do it on poems I like. So yeah, that was my driver. Yeah. I don't have, yeah, we could share to you. So told me, I just saw the comment, the painting that was referenced. We can send it to you later on. I don't have any way of looking online right now, or if somebody else wants to do it, but yeah, it's a scary painting. That's all I can say. But yeah, this no, I was really happy to be able to present these poems, since, well, at first I didn't really want to translate them, and so when I saw David was doing the translation of Victor Hugo, I just tasked him with doing the fable of the cat and the mice, and I think it turned out well. So yeah, pretty happy that I could share that with you guys, and that, you know, just to bring up this discussion. And also, I didn't really want to make it too political. Obviously, people will make the links to what they want with what I said and what was presented. But obviously, I thought these poems and paintings have this universal quality that whenever you find yourself in history, whether it was back in the 1930s, 40s, today, you know, 2 centuries ago, I think that they are very valuable. And as the quote by Frost that I'm sure I'm not doing justice to, said that, you know, these poetry, the real great poems are things that are passed from one generation to the other, and they are seen as that, as being so important that they have to be passed over and over again, because it would be a loss for all of us, for all of civilization, if they were forgotten. And so I think that's why I wanted to share that with you. I don't see anybody else.
I think Kelly.
Oh, Kelly, sorry. We're calling on Kelly.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your presentation there. And in the invitation link, you mentioned something about you're interested in shattering the dichotomy imposed on the subjective and objective world. I think that's what you said. And so it got me like, well, I didn't really know what dichotomy meant, but I looked it up, and it means like basically division, like two sides, you know, of a picture, a scene, or whatever. And then subjective and objective. I've heard it before. I've thought about it, and so I even looked that up again, and you know, like subjective. Tell me if I'm wrong, but subjective is more or less like how I feel, how I feel about. Say I'm looking at the painting, you know, how I feel about the painting, and then the objective part would be just like looking without feeling, but just looking at the you know, the just all the things that are in the picture, and not really allowing my feelings to interfere. And then like later on, you mentioned you know, when you're faced with two bad options, you know, well, there's a third option, and it's like, well, you didn't really. It's like we know the two options, I guess. Like, so what's the third one, you know? So, and that's where our self-reflection process would come in. I don't know. Any comments like that?
That's very good. That's it. That's it. Exactly. You got it. I mean, if you, I didn't necessarily want to put it in words, but yeah, I think you have put the finger on something there. I mean, the two different options. It could you could see you know, whether in the, especially I think in the paintings, you could look at them and try to figure out, you know, like objectively, like we said, like, okay, so we can count how many people are in the boat. We can tell you that, yeah, it doesn't look so good at that point, although there is a ray of lights, and so there might be, the storm might come down, but we don't know really. So we could objectively just tell, you know, all of the different facts, everything that we see, and then so how do you feel about that? You know, how are we supposed to take that in also on a more personal level? That could be an option too. That could be, well, but depending, you know. So you're right. Subjective, objective. I didn't. Is there really such a big like dichotomy, or should there be? Yeah.
I don't know.
There's Schiller has written on the aesthetical education of man. I think that should that would be a great reading to try to actually look more in depth into that dichotomy. But for what I wanted to do with the painting, I think that what you said, if you applied them to the painting and the poems, that's a good point to start. Yes.
Well, yeah, like the cat there, you know, all these, everyone's talking, and I guess they're talking about the problem of the day, and it's like, well, they come to this conclusion, and I'm not sure if that's subjective. I guess that's objective, and then they go, well, who's going to put the bell on the cat? And I can just picture everyone like, they just shut her right up and their feelings take over. It's like, well, I'm not going to do it. Or they're waiting for someone else to speak, but nobody's speaking. But then there's a third option there. And well, I don't really have that third option personally, unless the third option is, well, I'll speak up and I'll put the bell on the cat and then face the consequences. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
But in that poem, wasn't there comment about maybe the strongest should do that. And I was thinking, no, not the strongest. We need someone a little further back than that. Because just in case that one gets taken out trying, we still need the strongest to lead us.
Okay, yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah, so the fastest or the smallest or the more athletic one.
So Pascal, is that, hanging the bell on the cat, sort of hopeful or positive or both ways? You could take it both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could take it. Yeah, the third way. I don't know. I mean, I could give you my idea, but might be too subjective.
Well, no, I'd like to hear it.
Well, there's different things you could say about it, and as I said, well, during the presentation, I didn't necessarily want to go too much into politics, but this, I think, is a very interesting story for nowadays. You know, what the situation we're in all around the world. It's you could say it's pretty chaotic. It's pretty wild. We see, depending on, different screens that you're looking at and the channels that you're tuning in, you see two totally different world, right? It's really amazing to see what kind of situation we're in today. And so I thought that poem, the fable of the cat and the mice, that's very interesting, because we don't have princes anymore, at least not supposed to. We're supposed to live in democracy, right? So what does that mean? I mean, different people are taking decisions, right, that are affecting the whole of society. And in that fable, at the end, the author was calling unto the prince to do something about it, because there seemed to have, the decision was made that the bell was the solution to the problem of the mice, but nobody was ready to do it. And so who can do it? Who's gonna actually volunteer to maybe sacrifice himself for the good of the community of cats, right? So yeah. I don't necessarily want to go too much into nowadays, but I think that's interesting to try to, make the parallels.
In the early days, like in the beginning of kings and queens and princes, I believe it was their job to defend their realms, their communities.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's basically, that's how they became to be what they became, because they actually did defend their own kind or their region or whatever it was. And then somehow, like either them or like just some kind of corruption came in. And well, it seems like in the spirit of the poem there, like, doesn't sound like the prince really had much power back then, or something happened to them. And today, like, well, like you said, who are the princes today? Are the defenders, really? Like, when the government breaks down, who does it?
Yeah, reminds me of the quote I gave you from Shelley right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kelly. I know other people had their hands up right now. Was it Nathan first? I'm not sure. Nathan, did you have something? Then Danielle and Adria.
I didn't.
Oh,
I don't
thought
know.
saw your
I
hand
I
going.
was, yeah, I'm sorry. That's a
Just
mistake. I didn't mean.
All right, that's good.
Oh, I see. Oh my goodness.
We're all
All right.
shaking.
I'm just listening.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Danielle?
All right.
Well, for me, the bell around the cat's neck means like we have to take responsibility. Like everyone has kind of to maybe try to do something, figure something. It's about own self. Well, I don't know if it's right in English. I mean, notre responsabilité, our own responsibility and situation, and our own willingness to do something, and not wait for someone else to do something for ourselves, but so it's just a comment that I wanted to make. Okay.
Yeah, good point. Adria?
I had wanted to mention that on some level, Matthew's question of, do we live in a, I don't know if I'm misphrasing it, but do we have a positive outlook or do we have a negative outlook? How do we approach the universe? Is the universe, conspiring against us, or is the universe an intelligent life form and we're part of this amazing thing? And how do you want to move forward with your life and make a creative contribution to this magnificence? And in a way, the Bruegel seems to be carrying on with this kind of fear mongering and with this kind of iconography that says, we're all going to die. There's no escaping death, and it's going to be harrowing. And this is one way that it could be harrowing, and this is another way that you could suffer. And the whole thing is just terrorism, with, I guess, the goal of kind of hurting people towards believing and behaving in a certain way out of fear. And then the other painting is saying, even though there is fear, there is also hope and salvation. And I don't know, it just seems to be not evoking fear in this kind of terrorist way that's meant to kind of corral the troops. I know you didn't want to get too much into politics or contemporary things, but
I'm not, but you can.
that obviously has a message that I think is pretty contemporary. And in terms of Shelley, I wanted to ask you, it's kind of, I don't know if you wanted to make any kind of connection of him. Didn't he die at sea in a boat? And was it his wife who conceived of Frankenstein and this kind of post-human monster and whatnot? I mean, and there's so much that you have here that you could, if you wanted, bring into like a really, cohesive whole, if you wanted to intertwine things. And, I really have going to confess, I don't know enough about Victor Hugo, but obviously it was written during a time of, political breakdown, revolution, anarchy, what have you, was going around during the, is it the second revolution or what have you.
Well,
so
he lived a long life. Yeah, he saw a lot of things.
I don't know. I mean, there was even a remake of Les Miserables that, if I'm not mistaken, it was released 2019, 2020 here, in which it characterized these, kind of French white policemen who went around the suburbs of Paris, harassing these, African immigrant, kids, and they got their just desserts when the kids revolted, and it was pretty violent, horrible I guess it would, Les Miserables is a violent, horrible story, but definitely speaks to our times.
Right.
Oh, Pascal, did you ever?
Yeah, I was going to call on you.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, sorry.
You're up. That's good. Go ahead, Satomi.
I was just wondering if you ever did define the poetical principle.
You want me to define the poetical principle?
What you think, because I think Adria was kind of, speaking about things that will give us hope and that we as people can do something, even small as it is.
Yeah, I don't know if I can define it in words, really, or I wanted the poems and the painting to speak for me. I think that's the best way to. I don't think I have words really. Yeah. I could write something, but yeah, it's not.
Well, maybe the power of words and light that is really within all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I think so. That I think that's the idea. That's why Victor Hugo, he talks about the poet, but as I mentioned, who's the poet? And Shelley talks about poetry also, and he says, well, people that didn't know they were poets became the unacknowledged legislators of the world, right? So that's puzzling, to say the least. Who is the poet, and what is he communicating?
Yeah, that's a good one to think about. Unacknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these unacknowledged poets. I think there's a lot of. I love the thought of these emerging people that are slowly coming forth.
Mm. And there's this saying that politics is downstream from culture, that I hear a lot on different podcasts these days. And I mean, it does, this is also puzzling today. What kind of culture do we live in? Do we want to emulate? Are we part of culture? Are we making culture? I'm not sure, So, well, I have an idea.
Well, I think what you're just doing,
today,
I think just what you're doing today is giving us many ideas and inspirations that we can be light, we can be word. Mm-hmm. And, just to even get us to start to awaken a little bit.
That's an idea. Yeah.
To possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
You've given us many possibilities.
Right. That's true. I see Jerry and now Nathan as is and up. So Jerry first and Nathan. But these are all good comments. I like the way this discussion has been going on.
Yes,
I'm not talking
very,
too much.
very.
That's good.
No, keep going. But just in the last conversations, and that the defense of poetry, you have Shelley up there where he's talking about the poetic principle. He also contrasts that with superstition.
Right.
But the point, you finally brought up the word volunteer, which I like, because I was thinking that too myself, in the first poem, Deschamps, who will bell the cat, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing is, but there is no volunteers, but in your mind, that's what you're looking for, a volunteer, but there isn't one in the poem. So there's that dichotomy. And then I was thinking again, the last painting, the Bruegel.
Mm-hmm.
And the person with the spotlight on them, because we're trying to figure out what the heck is he thinking. And on the one hand, where is he looking?
Mhm.
Well, it might appear he's looking at the king who's dead. So what is he thinking about there? Like, the king's dead. Who's gonna rule? Who's gonna lead?
Mhm.
And then there's also, I like to throw a monkey wrench in anything. So maybe he's not protecting the musician in that.
Mhm.
Maybe that's who he's listening to, because he's not looking at them. He's looking at the king, but he's listening to the music. So what is this guy thinking? Anyway, it just really gets you thinking about this whole concept, like you said, volunteer, which isn't said, but it's there as a thought, but it's never actually said. it's, it's fascinating.
Mhm.
Anyway,
These paintings could be put in sound. That would be interesting. That's an interesting idea,
yes.
an exposition.
Well, they say a picture says 1,000 words, but that one is probably closer to 1,000,000. It's just,
It's a whole symphony.
yeah, yes,
Uh-huh.
it really is.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. These are all interesting hypotheses. Yeah. Nathan?
Yeah. Well, I really like the what you said, Pascal, about the making the bell ring, on the cat, the bell ring. Yeah, I just I feel like that really does actually put into words that describing the poetic principle that you were talking about. I thought about what Shelley says, legislators to the world or something, or of the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes artists can kind of be connected to culture, and but I think that, well, they are connected to culture, which is a result, whether it's downstream or upstream. It's it's the stream of culture, influenced by both things, upward and downward on the stream. But I feel like Shelley has it. I like it when he opens up his talking about the Christian principles of poetic principles, and I think that is really what it comes down to, about bringing a torchlight, in his hand to the world. I think that is the responsibility to the world of an artist. So I kind of think that, like, sometimes poets or artists get into this whole, they're not really being brave. They're not really taking a stand sometimes, and they're just being subjective, and which can be just as destructive as being objective, but not having any kind of grace in what you're doing. Anyway, I'm just meandering along. I'm sorry. I really just wanted to talk about the bell. I thought that was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure people, when you said that, I'm sure everybody had their own example.
Yeah,
What,
rings a bell.
we see in our culture, and what's floating on the radio airwaves these days. And it's true. I mean, yeah, I try to connect. I try to see what the younger generation is doing, is listening to, and watching, and all that. And yeah, it's not always super uplifting. Yeah, it's we have a task for sure. Adria.
I've got one last comment. I apologize. I'm just so enthusiastic. In some weird way, the bell, I always think of Quasimodo with the bell, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, when I think of Hugo. And there's this whole kind of history of what the bells at the church bells could communicate to the people.
Mm-hmm.
Role of the bell ringer. But one of the uncanny things, relative to, any kind of an omen or a signal that something, maybe evil was afoot in the world, was when Notre Dame burnt, and it was Holy Thursday, the week of, right before Easter. It was, they call it Maundy Thursday on 2019, right before COVID. And it was just such a, and then they were saying, oh, well, it released lead into the community. And, it was really very frightening thing. So in a weird way, that bell was rung. I don't know exactly who, some kind of divine agency or satanic agency, or I don't know if it, what force, whether it was good or evil, or whether it was beyond good and evil, contributed to sounding the alarm that something was coming. But, there was also at the selection of Pope Francis, they sent the smoke signals up from the from the Vatican, and as soon as they indicated that they had determined a new pope, the Vatican was struck by lightning, not once but twice, right after they signaled with the that they had chosen the new pope. So they chose a new pope, and then the St. Peter's gets hit by lightning, and then the Notre Dame got hit somehow with this fire, and then the world got hit with this kind of crazy thing, and the Pope is telling everybody to take these vaccines as an act of God, and he still to this day hasn't retracted that. And no, it's just, there seems to be good and evil forces kind of circulating in a way that I've never witnessed, and I'm almost 60 years old, but maybe they've always been circulating like this and I just was oblivious, or sheltered, or combination of both, or I don't know.
Well, I guess who's gonna hang the bell on the cat? Did Nathan, you had, no, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, we'll all hang the bell on the cat.
Yeah, things are ringing everywhere right now. I hope something's ringing.
Yeah.
And oh, Susan now.
I wanted to ask you, Pascal, what was the name that you said that would be a good one for us to read? I typed into the chat, you just volunteered to lead that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well,
what was the name?
We're reading Plato right now. We're reading a poet, as Jerry has mentioned in one of his articles. That's a good article I was thinking about also. But yeah, the letters, Friedrich Schiller's letters on the aesthetical education of man. That's a good enterprise. We'll have to see what is next on the list for the readings, Wednesday evening readings. But that's a good one. Yeah, that would be fun for sure.
So what you were mentioning earlier was Schiller's letters on the aesthetical education of man.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to say, when you had that painting of Jesus and the disciples in the boat in the middle of the storm, I've heard so many ministers preach from that story and talk about how Jesus said, let's get into the boat and go to the other side. And then this storm blew up around them and they're all just freaking out because of the storm. But Jesus said, we're going to the other side. So this storm cannot take us down, because the Spirit of life himself said, we're going to the other side. So I think, like that guy that's peering over the edge of the boat into those waves, we need to not do that. We need to not do that. We are going to the other side. And we are going to get there safely. So I may not be able to calm the rest of the storm that's out there, but whatever storm is happening in me, I can say, peace, be still. We're going to make it through this. And I just loved a few minutes ago when you and Satomi were talking, and it's like we can't quite put it into words. You guys were saying we can't quite put it into words, but we can feel it. And I began to feel it in especially like the first 10 minutes of this session and the things that you read, how they are so uplifting and inspiring and edifying. All of those words that mean for our whole self to feel built up and empowered. And we have to be seeking those things and be seeking to give those things to others. And just my reaction to what you were saying when I wrote in the chat that the poet is uniquely gifted to inspire and uplift others and can give us a vision for the future that we can work toward. The poet really is the prophet of today. That you can give us vision for the future as you follow your gifts and share them with us, then you're giving us a vision for the future that we can all work towards. I'm involved in several different prayer groups, and we've been doing a lot of praying for all of the creatives in this next generation to be equipped and for their gifts to be heard. Because, yeah, they shape culture in a really, really powerful way. So thank you, Pascal. This has been really beautiful.
Great. Well, I'm very happy that you liked it. And, yeah, these presentations are great for that. Oh, you got me speechless. I don't know what to say now, but thank you. Okay, is it a good time to end? I don't know, unless other people want to chime in. I think we kind of went around. We might not have. Well, I think we got closer and closer to, what the principle is. All of us together. If we haven't really touched it, as you said, we felt it somehow, right? And so we went around and around and around, try to find it, figure it out, and that was the purpose. That was the idea. Yeah. And I hope other people will have other presentations to get that ball rolling and going somewhere else creative. That would be fun. So I guess we've talked. Yeah, I guess it's 4 quarters of 4 already. Well, that's good. Well, I'm very happy that you were all there for the presentation. I know some people had to leave a bit earlier, but they sent some nice messages too, and I'm going to read all of them after that, since I'm saving the chat. So thank you for all for coming today. And I'm not exactly sure what the presentation is going to be next week. Matthew has not given me the schedule, so I'm not exactly sure, but we'll keep you posted and we'll send the invitation for sure. And until then, I hope that everybody is going to be well and is going to be hanging bells on cats a bit everywhere you go. Right?
Merci, Pascal.
Thank you.
All right. Merci, de rien. De rien. You're all welcome.
Au revoir.
Thank you much.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Okay.